President, I'd simply like to read a statement from Dana W. White, spokesperson for the Pentagon. Quote, "We have been working under a continuing resolution for 3 years now. Our current CR expires 19 January. This is wasteful and destructive. We need a fully funded fiscal year 18 budget or face ramifications on our military. The leader wants to move that very CR that the Pentagon objects to, even without a 60-vote margin. I strenuously object."
Mr. President.
Objection is heard. The Majority Leader.
I send the cloture motion to the desk on the motion to concur.
Clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the motion to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 195, signed by 17 senators as follows.
I ask the reading of the names be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I move to concur in the House amendment to H.R. 195 with
Reserving the right to object. No, sorry, not objecting. Mr. President. No, not
Mr. President,
Majority Leader has the floor.
Fill the tree. Go ahead.
I move to concur in the House amendment to H.R. 195 with a further amendment.
Clerk will report.
The Senator from Kentucky, Mr. McConnell, moves to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 195 with an amendment numbered 1903.
I ask the reading be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I ask for the yeas and nays on the motion to concur with amendment.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
The Senator from Kentucky, Mr. McConnell, proposes an amendment numbered 1904 to amendment numbered 1903.
I ask the reading be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I move to refer the House message on H.R. 195 to the Committee on Appropriations to report back forthwith with instruction.
Clerk will report.
The Senator from Kentucky, Mr. McConnell, moves to refer the House message on H.R. 195 to the Committee on Appropriations to report back forthwith with instructions, being amendment number 1905.
I ask for the yeas and nays on my motion.
Is there a sufficient second? There is. Yeas and nays are ordered.
I have an amendment to the instructions.
Clerk will report.
The Senator from Kentucky, Mr. McConnell, proposes an amendment number 1906 to the instructions of the motion to refer H.R. 1905 to the Committee on Appropriations.
I ask the reading be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I ask for the yeas and nays on my amendment.
Is there a sufficient second? There is.
I have a second-degree
The
amendment.
yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
The Senator from Kentucky, Mr. McConnell, proposes an amendment numbered 1907 to amendment numbered 1906.
Mr. President.
Democrat Leader.
Mr. President, to delay a vote on cloture when we all know the outcome makes no sense. The government's funding expires tomorrow night at midnight. Let us vote tonight on cloture so we can move forward. So perhaps we can bring the president to the table. If not, so we can undergo serious negotiations to get things done. You've just heard from the Pentagon. The Pentagon thinks this CR is wrong for our military. The statement, again, from Dana White, Chief Pentagon spokesperson. I want to repeat it so my colleagues can all hear it. We have been working under a continuing resolution for 3 years now. Our current CR expires tomorrow, January 19th. This is wasteful and destructive. We need a fully funded fiscal year 18 budget or face ramifications for our military. Because of the urgent needs we face, the military and so many of the others, opioids, veterans, pensions. We should not delay any further. We should move cloture tonight, see the outcome. I think we all know it will be defeated, and start serious negotiations tomorrow morning. That is what we should do. So I ask unanimous consent that the mandatory quorum call be waived, and that notwithstanding Rule 22, the cloture motion filed on the motion to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 195 ripen at 10 p.m. Thursday, January 18th, 10 p.m. tonight.
Is there objection?
Object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Democrat leader.
Does the leader have any more motions? No. Okay. Mr. President, let me address, the leader addressed what was happening before the vote on the motion to proceed extensively. I'd like to address that now. The House of Representatives has sent the Senate a continuing resolution constructed by the Republican Speaker and passed without the consultation of House Democrats or... Could we have order, please?
Order in the chamber, please.
A continuing resolution constructed by the Republican Speaker and passed without the consultation of the House Democrats or Senate Democrats whatsoever. The Republican leader is now saying to us, take it or leave it. Here's why members from both sides of the aisle want to leave it. We've been skating by on continuing resolution after continuing resolution for almost 6 months. First, we passed a 3-month CR. Then we passed a 2-week CR. Then a 1-month CR. Now we're offering another month-long delay of the inevitable. We can't keep kicking the can down the road and shuffling our feet after it. In another month, we'll be right back here at this moment with the same web of problems at our feet, in no better position to solve them. The government of the most powerful nation in the world should simply not be run this way. These successive short-term funding bills hurt our military, as I have mentioned. Just ask Secretary Mattis if this is what he'd prefer we do. Another continuing resolution or an honest-to-goodness budget that allows our Defense Department to plan ahead and meet their obligations. We all know he'd prefer the latter. That's why some of my Republican colleagues have already said they join with Democrats to reject this bill. They know, like I know, this is no way to do our business. This is not a partisan issue. We should be united in trying to come to a solution, not just kick the can down the road. And the truth is, we don't have to do it this way. The majority leader in his speech earlier, my friend, tried to reduce this to a binary choice. Take my bill or else shut down the government. That's not the case. It's simply not. These aren't the only options available to him or to any of us. Democrats and Republicans have been negotiating for months about several issues. A bipartisan deal is within reach on lifting the caps for both defense and domestic spending, on health care issues, on disaster relief, on immigration issues. A bipartisan deal is within reach. I've been part of those negotiations on all these issues. And now is the time to reach it, not a month from now. One reason we haven't gotten one already, frankly, is because the president has been impervious to compromise for several months. And another is he can't maintain a consistent position. We all know that. He accepts bipartisan overtures on one day, only to reject them on the next. He makes and then rescinds and then remakes demands. He encourages compromise one day only to thwart it the next by saying he'll only accept a deal that gives him 100% of what he wants. That's not what a great deal maker does. And folks, here in Congress, in his own party, the people in Congress in his own party don't even know what he wants. I feel for them. I feel for our leader. He's in an awful difficult position. I know that. We all know that. Leader McConnell yesterday said he's still trying to figure out what the president is for. Only a few moments ago, the leader said the president's views have not been made fully apparent yet. Letting this ambivalence and chaos continue for another month is just not the answer. It's not a good way to get a deal. It's not the right way to run our country, our dear, beloved country. Tonight or tomorrow, the president will see. I had hoped it would be tonight. We can't waste any time. But the president would see that this approach was rejected on a bipartisan basis. Hopefully, he'll see the light, come to the table, negotiate seriously for the first time in this lengthy process. Ultimately, the answer here might be to pursue an idea floated by a few of my Republican colleagues. Pass a clean extension of government funding for 4 or 5 days to give us a hard, final deadline to finalize a deal. Passing a short-term continuing resolution ensures that both sides remain at the table and can quickly reach a deal that funds our military, our domestic priorities like the fight against opioids, protects dreamers, funds health care, and aid for those harmed by recent disasters. Everyone in this chamber wants some of those things, if not all. Frankly, I think we can still solve this by the deadline tomorrow. As my friend from South Carolina said, we could solve all this in 30 minutes if only folks were willing. May not quite be 30 minutes, but knowing the negotiations I do, we could do it rather quickly. Certainly it wouldn't take us 30 days. Hopefully, after the CR goes down, folks will be willing. And with a little more time on our hands, maybe the majority leader, we're trying to help you, Mitch, can pin down just what President Trump wants in order to get a deal. Nobody wants to shut down the government, Mr. President. Democrats don't want to shut down the government. Republicans don't want to shut down the government. I believe that sincerely. The only person who's ever rooted for a shutdown, frankly, is our president, who said our country could use a good shutdown. A good shutdown, only President Trump could come up with that phrasing. Nobody else thinks it's a good shutdown. Of course, no shutdown can be good for the American people. I fervently pray and urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Let us strive to avoid one. I urge my colleagues to reject this measure for the reasons I mentioned. It wasn't fair. We weren't consulted. It was take it or leave it. That's not how it should work. That's how almost none of us want this to work. And if we can't figure this out by tomorrow night, I urge the majority leader in particular, and the majority, to support a clean extension of funding for a few days so that we can finally come to a resolution and get down to the so many other things we need to do in this chamber. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
this isn't terribly complicated. We've been in discussions for a couple of months on all of the issues that are urgent. The funding of the government, the children's health insurance program, and other matters that we all know need to be dealt with. My good friend, the Democratic leader, is saying we've had too many continuing resolutions, but suggests we pass yet another one. And the bill that's before us that we just voted to proceed to, I believe enjoys the support, every element of it enjoys the support of almost everybody on both sides of the aisle. So it's appropriate to ask the question, why are we where we are? Only one reason. The continued interjection of an issue about which there is no urgency into a discussion about how to deal with a potpourri of issues that do need to be urgently met. And that's the issue of illegal immigration. So what our friends on the other side are saying here is they're prepared to shut down the government over the issue of illegal immigration. Now, on that issue, there's a bipartisan interest in solving the DACA problem, but the president has given us until March. The last time I looked, this was January. My colleagues, where is the urgency here? There isn't any. So the reason these talks have gone on so long is because they've consisted continuously on throwing the illegal immigration issue into the pool of these other issues and are now saying to the American people, we're going to shut the government down if we can't have our way on this issue right now, even though it only becomes a problem in March. So I hope the American people understand why we are where we are. No amount of trying to obfuscate this, to confuse it with all of these other issues makes any sense at all. There's pretty broad bipartisan agreement we need to address every single one of these issues. But the reason we're here right now is our friends on the other side say, solve this illegal immigration problem right now, or we're going to shut the government down. That is a fact. That's not spin. That's a fact. That's the only reason we are where we are tonight. So I hope the American people will not be confused about this. We want to fund the government. We want to solve the S-chip problem and a variety of other issues that almost all of us agree on. And we wanted to do it before tomorrow night. But my assumption is, at some point between now and tomorrow night, 41 members of the opposition party are going to prevent us from passing a measure, the details of which they all support, because they can't get their way on this illegal immigration issue, which really only becomes urgent in March. I yield the floor.
Democrat leader.
Just a brief rejoinder. First, there have been very good attempts, bipartisan attempts, to solve this problem. 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans met the problem right in the middle. It was the other side, your side, leader, that didn't want to go along with that agreement. It's a fair and decent agreement where each side gave. And it's an important agreement, and it's a vital agreement. And no one has figured out a way to pass a bill independently in February. Any vote, any bill that might get a majority of the Republicans in the House on this issue will not get Democrats. And any bill that gets a majority of Democrats will not get a majority of the Republican side in the House and will not be put on the floor. So this is the way to go on that issue. But there are many other issues out here too, make no mistake about it. Opioids. Our national death rate has declined. How long we live has declined because of opioids. We haven't funded it. Every one of us in our states knows we need that. This resolution does nothing on opioids. Veterans. In my state, in your states, veterans are waiting online for treatment after they risk their lives for us. This resolution doesn't fund it. And you say, well, maybe we'll do it after a month. Well, we sure haven't done it for 6 months. What about pensions? The millions of Americans, working people, who have paid in month after month, who lost salary. They declined salary increases so they know they could live a life of decency, hardly wealth, when they retired. That's being extinguished. We have an urgent obligation to deal with those people. We feel it, and I know many people on the other side feel it. So many other issues, healthcare issues. I see my friend from Maine. We had a discussion last night. I talked subsequently to my friend from Washington State and my friend from Florida. We could come to an arrangement on that rather quickly and deal with that issue. And disaster relief for Texas, for Florida, for Puerto Rico, and for the West. We need to deal with that issue as well. So there are lots of issues to deal with. And on all of these important issues, all of them, this resolution kicks the can down the road and gives us no reason to believe that it'll be any different than the first CR, the second CR, the third CR, and the fourth CR. What we're proposing is not original with us. It was proposed by 3 or 4 members on that side of the aisle. A very short-term increase would force the president to the table, hopefully, because that's been the barrier, in the words of the majority leader, to solving the DACA problem and other issues, and would get us to act. These are not such easy issues. Without a deadline, we may never get them done. And the fears of the Pentagon, so well stated tonight by the DOD spokesperson, will get worse and worse and worse. So I would, in an act of bipartisanship, not accusing one side or the other. I didn't accuse one side or the other of shutting down the government. I'm not trying to play for political points, even false ones. I am trying to get us to come together on a bipartisan nature to get something done. I hope all of us on both sides of the aisle rise to the occasion. I yield the floor.
He's saying he opposes the bill because it doesn't have everything we've been talking about in it, even though the things that are in the bill he does like. So the complaint now is it doesn't have the other issues in it. Well, the reason it doesn't have the other issues in it is because we haven't been able to reach a global agreement on how much we're going to spend. These talks have been going on endlessly. Many of you have not been involved in them. We're exhausted. On and on and on we've been talking about all this. Everything the Democratic leaders mentioned. Why? Why did they never let us reach an agreement? Illegal immigration. That's what they've shoehorned into all this. Shoehorned that issue right into it and said we won't solve any of this other stuff until we deal with this. Now, I gather the Democratic leaders questioning the good faith of some of us about whether we want to deal with the DACA issue. I do. I see Senator Cotton back here, and Senator Tillis. I think we'd all like to deal with the DACA issue. But there are some serious problems with legal immigration. And this is a big enough issue to warrant being discussed all by itself without being shoehorned in to a bill full of real emergencies. Because there is no real emergency in the immigration area. We have until March to deal with it. So make no mistake about it. We are where we are for one reason and one reason only, within a day of a government shutdown. And that is the insistence of our friends on the other side that we deal with this non-emergency right now because they were unwilling to close out all of these other issues we've been discussing ad nauseum, literally, for months.
Mr. President. The Assistant Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I appreciate the Majority Leader clarifying for us what this is all about. And actually, I have to thank the Democratic leader for clarifying that this is really about the issue of illegal immigration. That's the reason why there has been no agreement on spending caps because our friends across the aisle don't want to agree on spending caps because they want to use everything else as leverage in order to get an outcome on this dispute over illegal immigration. And as the Majority Leader pointed out, this isn't so much about what's in the bill as what they said should be in the bill. Because I presume our colleagues are for the 6-year reauthorization of the Children's Health Insurance Program. It was voted almost unanimously out on a bipartisan basis in the Senate Finance Committee. The matter of veterans that the Democratic leader mentioned, well, veterans are going to be hurt by what they have done or will do tomorrow, I presume, in defeating this 1-month continuing resolution. I find it rather disingenuous to say that we're against this short-term continuing resolution because we want another short-term continuing resolution, guaranteeing that there will yet again be another short-term resolution. Once the spending caps are agreed to, it's going to take a couple of weeks for the bill to be put together so we can actually vote on it. So our colleagues across the aisle and say they want another 3 or 4 day continuing resolution, that guarantees yet another continuing resolution. And all of this is really camouflage to hide their true intention, as the Majority Leader pointed out, trying to force a decision where there is not yet consensus and a willingness of the President to support it on the issue of deferred action for childhood arrivals. That deadline for people who can no longer re-sign up is March the 5th. In the meantime, nobody's in any jeopardy. None of the 690,000 young people who were brought here as children are in any kind of jeopardy. And we are having discussions on a daily basis. We had one today that Senator Durbin, Steny Hoyer, the Democratic whip, the Majority Leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy, and I again met with the White House and the Department of Homeland Security to try to make some progress. And I think there was a beginning of some real progress toward a resolution.